In April 2015, the United Nations hosted a meeting to discuss the use of armed robots in combat. Many experts argued that military robots can't tell the difference between civilians and soldiers, and therefore may violate a fundamental law of war. So what are the laws of war? Historians have observed that as long as there has been war, there's been an effort to protect non-combatants like women and children. This custom forms part of the basis for our rules of war today. The majority of these rules were internationally codified in the 19th and 20th centuries during the Hague Conventions and Geneva Conventions. Nearly every country in the world has pledged to abide by these guidelines. As the nature of war has changed, these rules have been regularly updated. In general, the laws of war are meant to protect civilians, prisoners of war, the sick, and the wounded. For example, soldiers cannot target civilians at all, only other combatants, and they can't destroy civilian crops or poison their drinking water. Soldiers also may not torture prisoners of war and must keep them alive, giving them food, water, and access to communication with their families. For the sick and wounded on the battlefield, soldiers must allow doctors to rescue and treat people from both sides. Additionally, the rules of war prohibit the use of indiscriminate weapons, like landmines, cluster bombs, or chemical weapons, which cause suffering to civilians and soldiers alike. But there are many complexities to modern warfare that make the basic rules of war hard to follow. For instance, terrorists often disguise themselves as civilians or use civilians as human shields. Yet, any opposing forces must still fight legally and avoid harming civilians. Experts have suggested that the rules of war should change to cope with modern terrorism. Hypocrisy over the laws of war is also common. The United States was one of the major contributors to the Hague and Geneva Conventions, yet they have commonly ignored these rules. In Abu Ghraib prison, suspected terrorists were tortured by American officials, which is a violation of the detainees' rights. And the U.S. also still uses landmines in the Korean demilitarized zone. As new methods of warfare are being developed, the international laws of warfare must also develop. It's likely that no war has been fought fairly, but at least with some basic rules, innocent casualties may be minimized. Our friend Laura Ling has an amazing first-hand story about what it is like to be a prisoner of war in North Korea. Her story is both amazing and inspiring.
It was the scariest time of my life. I was isolated in what is perhaps the most isolated country in the world.
Check out that full video also in the description, and consider subscribing to Seeker for more just like it. Thank you for watching TestTube.